What is up? Welcome in to No Pun Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host this week, Ryan Weiss. I take a week off, come back to a promotion. I'm that damn good. What can I say? But we all know I'm only here because Joe Zolo, once again, is not here. He's a big old slacker. I still have Josh Hudson with me, though. And this week, for the first time on No Pun Intended, we have our guy, Nate Cheatham from IDP Guys. You may remember Nate from our draft show that we did in conjunction with IDP Guys a few months ago. Well, now he's here to do the No Pun Intended show with us. It's going to be a great one. We're covering the Indianapolis Colts, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the New Orleans Saints. Stay tuned. And then I'm going to find a button. Welcome in, everybody. There's a reason they don't often let me host the show. It's because I don't know what I'm doing with the backstage stuff. But we figured it out. We got there. As mentioned, I am Ryan Weiss. No Joe Zolo this week, so you get to hear my voice for most of the show. But we have a very special show for you. I have not one, but two founders of fantasy football websites for you to learn from this week. Of course, my boss, the guy who signs our imaginary checks, Josh Hudson, is with us. Josh, how's it going, buddy?
It's still weird when people call me a boss. Like, I just kind of push buttons and say, oh, yeah, you want to do that? Cool. Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Go for it.
Hey.
But I'm doing great. I love the compliments and whatever.
The long and short of this is you do get to kick us out of the group chat if we get out of line because you.
This is true. And I have had to do that, unfortunately, a few too many times. So
it happens every now and then. I'm going to remind you, boss, that since I'm the one doing all the talking, you should be sharing this over on Twitter right now because it's usually.
I'm doing that. Exactly. That's what I'm doing.
And then, like I said in the intro, we have the founder of IDP Guys, Nate, with us this week. If you're not familiar with IDP Guys, one of the best IDP resources, but they do offense too, and Nate's going to be bringing the heat this week. Nate, thank you so much for joining us.
I am so happy to have been invited onto this show. It's that intro blew me away. That was really cool. Motion graphic right there. For those that don't know, I'm also like a graphic designer, so fully appreciate seeing something as cool as that, and excited for this show.
That's all Joe's work. Joe maybe gets to it a little smoother than I do, but he just clicks the button a little bit faster. It just takes me a few extra steps. So as I mentioned in the intro, this week we are covering the Indianapolis Colts, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the New Orleans Saints. Two of my absolute favorite offenses and one very potential dumpster fire, but we'll save those guys for later. We are going to start off with the Colts. And if you followed the show, we've been doing these shows for a little over a month now, I believe. We kind of do things in a very methodical method. So we're going to talk about the Colts to start off. The Colts went 9-8 last year, just missed the playoffs on a heartbreaking loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 18. There's no better way to talk about their season than to the epitome of losing to the Jags to end your season. It's just bad. But they brought their coach back. They brought their offensive coordinator back. It's going to be a very similar team to what they had last year, but there is a very big change at quarterback. Matt Ryan comes in for Carson Wentz, and they even got better on defense. We start with me and Josh's picks for players with the most fantasy upside. Josh has Matt Ryan, the new quarterback, and I have Michael Pittman because of the new quarterback. The player who might be the biggest trap for fantasy, Josh has Nyheim Hines, basing it on consistency. I went with Jelani Woods, and I know you're probably not drafting Jelani Woods, and you may be even asking who the hell Jelani Woods is, but I'm going to get to it a little bit later. The tight end room is a crowded room, and I don't really love it, but we are mostly here for our guest, and we give our guest a little bit different questions. And if you didn't know Nate was an IDP guy, you're going to find out real quick. So the very first question is, Nate, if there is one Indianapolis Colt you cannot leave your fantasy draft without, you have to have this guy, who's it going to be for you?
Well, so, I went into these questions kind of thinking a little more on the dynasty aspect, not realizing how, redraft centric you guys are. But I would have to say that if you can get Queedy Pie, the defensive end there in Indianapolis, in your draft, do it. Because after last year, there was a lot of hype coming out of the draft, him going there. and he didn't necessarily perform. He didn't perform bad, but he didn't blow away like people had expected. This year, the situation changes. There's some movement around him, and there's a chance that he could perform up to that above where he's going, because he's going really late in drafts, and you could grab him and get someone that could be your starting defensive end in dynasty going forward for some time. But in redraft, if you're playing with DLs, definitely grab him.
Perfect. And does the addition, I mentioned they got a little bit better on defense. They also brought in Stephon Gilmore at corner. Is bringing in a corner like that going to help defensive ends with a little bit better coverage on the back end to get after the quarterback?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you heard, it's talked about a lot, coverage sacks when the defensive end's able to break through the line because the quarterback's looking downfield and doesn't see anyone open until smack, he's on his butt.
It makes a lot of sense. Now we're going to go back to that other side of the field and maybe a quarterback who ends up smack on his butt. You have Matt Ryan as the player you're avoiding most, and I'm going to give you a chance to go, but I want to let Josh talk him up first, and then you can try to tell everybody why Josh is wrong. So Josh, you have him as the player with the most fantasy upside. Talk us into Matt Ryan after a rough couple of years. He broke the up-down Matt Ryan streak that everybody wanted to stick with him over the last couple of years. It's going to get better in Indianapolis.
I just want to go back to Quiddy Pie for a second. Like, that sounds like somebody's like rolling some sort of weird Southern accent off the tongue. Quiddy Pie. Like, really? Like, that's what his name is and how it's pronounced? Oh, good Lord. This should be a fun one. Okay, anyway, back to Matt Ryan. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is a much better offense than what we had in Atlanta, or what he had in Atlanta, excuse me. I will say the biggest downside here, Matt Ryan's been sacked over 40 times the last 4 years. The Colts offensive line, while great as a run blocking unit, has been a little suspect from a pass play perspective the last few years. Wentz was only sacked 32 times. The year before with Phillip Rivers, they only gave up 20 some odd sacks. I would definitely expect Matt Ryan to decrease his sack totals a little bit, which obviously is going to give him a little bit more time to throw. But because they run the football so much, he needs to be efficient with his passing attempts. I kind of see this offense around between 550, 560 pass attempts. But Ryan, you mentioned defense getting better defense, better running game. All Ryan has to do is get the ball to the targets. Outside of Michael Pittman and the two running backs, they really don't have a lot of reliable targets. Paris Campbell can't stay on the field. Alec Pierce is a rookie. We don't know what we're getting out of him. We know Mo Alley Cox. We know Kylan Granson as a rookie last year. Jelani Woods, as big of an athletic freak as he is, used to be a quarterback in college. He only has one full season at tight end. We know that tight end is the hardest offensive position to come into and get the ball rolling. I kind of worry a little bit, but this is a former MVP. He knows how to get it done.
I was going to say, up to this point, you have said all negative things. I thought you were on Nate's side. I literally was trying to figure out how I was going to take this to Nate. And then I'm like, wait a second. Nate's the bad side of this.
Getting here. Look, we saw Michael Pittman take a leap from his rookie year to his second year. If we can expect to continue that trend, he's going to command at least a 25% target share. You could be potentially looking at double-digit touchdowns and even 1,200 plus receiving yards. This could be his latest version of Julio Jones here. It's a bigger bodied wide receiver that can get down the field. Again, not going to sit here and put them in the same category. They are very different types of wide receivers. But we kind of said the same thing about Pittman with Carson Wentz in regards to Alshon Jeffrey's time in Philadelphia. Yeah. And we saw how that relationship paid off. Again, he is the only target. Where else is Matt Ryan going to look? I just, the way that they've been dividing things up at the tight end position lately, I feel like everybody's going to kind of be picking and choosing, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. They're all just going to kind of cut into each other's target share. So really the only two guys that I would trust are Pittman, who had a 69% catch percentage going down the field, which is pretty impressive, and Nyheim Hines, who's averaging close to an 80% catch rate over his career. Those are guys I want to get the ball in their hands. And Matt Ryan, the last couple of years, has had over 65. The last 4 years, he's had over 65% completion percentage. 3 of those years, over 67%. He's going to thread the needle. He's going to get the ball in these guys' hands and let them do work. Outside of the rushing upside, because he doesn't have any, He could easily throw
Gemma
for
concurs.
4,800 yards there. So, there's at least bottom tier, QB1 range, like, top 12. Because again, we saw Carson Wentz hit that. And I'm not saying that Matt Ryan can't do that, but I'm also like, look, why can't he? Because
I was going to say,
it feels that way.
That was the most negative positive thing I've ever heard, ever. You literally ended your statement by saying, I would trust Michael Pittman and Naheem Hines. You didn't even say the guy you were telling everybody to trust. Nate, Josh has already told himself why he's wrong, but you can pile on.
Okay. So, I'm going to take a little cue from Josh here and give some positives.
I was going to say, you're just going to talk positive the whole damn time.
There you go. Perfect.
So, yes, Matt Ryan goes to a new situation. The Falcons were, man, they've been a bit of a mess, especially when you take into like the Ridley situation last year going into this year, and just a lot of, I don't know, just poor management in that team. But so he goes to a new team, the Colts here. He's got a fresh start. My biggest problem, and this is the difference between him and Carson Wentz, is he's been in the league for a long time. He's never really strung together a lot of seasons where he's been a top quarterback prospect. He's good. My thinking is, so if you are in a redraft league or even dynasty, generally startups, like, he is almost undrafted. I was just looking at his ADP on the IDP Guys site, and we're talking about like 40 rounds worth of picks, and he wasn't picked. So, he's free.
Well, he's 37. And if you're talking dynasty, yeah, I wouldn't be wasting much time on him either. But
yeah, absolutely. So the other thing,
last year was the first year since 2010. He didn't throw for 4,000 yards. Like, the dude can sling it. So
absolutely. But I think that he's coming to the end of his career. And I think with that is Jonathan Taylor is a guy that is going to command, some carries. And if anything falters with Matt Ryan, he's just going to turn into, hand it off to Taylor and see where it goes type of quarterback. And so with that, like, where he's going in like redraft, you get him wicked late is probably I guess if you're playing super flex, redraft, you probably get him as your QB3, way back up. I like other guys around that. I am on record with not liking Jared Goff, and I like Jared Goff more than Matt Ryan.
Well, Jared Goff is infinitely cheaper than Ryan. I'm glad you brought up ADP, and I'm going to just jump into Joe's favorite game at this point. So Jared Goff is QB 27. I'm not even going to use him as a comparison at this point. There are a few names going ahead of Matt Ryan that I find interesting, and a couple of names behind Matt Ryan. So I just want you guys to tell me, who would you rather have in this situation? So all the way up at QB 16 is Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, a lot of new weapons in Miami, but Tua has been moderately disappointing. For your QB2 in a super flex league, who would you rather have, Tua or Matt Ryan? Josh.
I have Tua statted out higher, and a lot of that's just because I like the weapons better, so I'll take Tua.
I think there's a big trust in the weapons there. Nate, how do you feel?
Hard Tua.
Hard Tua? Okay. See, It's not as hard for me, but it's Tua for me as well. I'm going to skip Deshaun Watson because nobody should be drafting him. Justin Fields, QB 18. Josh.
I have Matt Ryan statted out higher, so give me Ryan. And that's with the potential rushing upside with Fields.
Okay. Nate?
Ooh, that one's a lot closer to me. I think that I would lean Fields because of the rushing upside.
Okay, so it's upside versus proven commodity. I'm big into Michael Pittman, and I think it's going to be a good season, so I would go Matt Ryan here. So those are the two that were really interesting. No, one more, I'm sorry. And then Trevor Lawrence, arguably the most disappointing first overall pick in a very long time. You can blame a lot of that on Urban Meyer, but Trevor Lawrence or Matt Ryan. Josh.
I also have Matt Ryan statted out higher than Trevor Lawrence. So
okay,
and a lot of it just boils down to I think Matt Ryan's ultimately going to throw more touchdown passes than either of those two guys. I mean,
Nate?
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair point on the touchdown passes, utilizing Jonathan Taylor to get you up the field, but then, Matt Ryan's experience there with touchdowns, I could definitely see it. I do like the chance of, the regime change in Jacksonville helping Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
And I think really the tiebreaker for me, because I would say this is tied. Just Jonathan Taylor and what he's going to command from that offense, and and what he's going to take away from Matt Ryan. Jacksonville doesn't have as much of that. They don't have that. I mean, they have good running backs, but it's just not the same. Like Jonathan Taylor's probably one of the best in the league right now. So I think I would Lawrence, but like
it'd be hard.
Slight.
So what I find interesting in this ADP, I'm going to quote you, is not Superflex ADP. While they are next to each other in ADP, Lawrence is going 17 picks ahead of Matt Ryan. So QB 19, QB 20, 17 pick difference. So more than a round difference between the two. So for them being that close, the 17 picks seems like a big one. The last two I want to hit with, I'm going to leave Jameis Winston off the list. I might come back to this when we get to the Saints. So the last one I kind of want to end with on that same note, do either one of you believe in the Zach Wilson rebound to the extreme of a Trevor Lawrence rebound? So Zach Wilson or Matt Ryan? Because Wilson has the weapons now too.
I have Matt Ryan ranked ahead of all three of those rookies, Wilson, Fields, and Lawrence. So, I mean, and that's just pure stat.
The 37-year-old over all of the 22-year-olds.
Yeah, again, I mean, we're talking redraft here. If this were Dynasty, yeah, it would be a hell of a lot different. But
obviously,
give me Matt Ryan. He's got Jonathan Taylor to take pressure off of him, right? Like, this isn't a situation where in Atlanta they didn't have good running backs. They haven't really had good running backs for the last few years, really. So Matt Ryan has been relied upon immensely, and that's what gets him into trouble, because then he starts overthinking. But he has a running game to lean on, so he has the ability to be a lot more efficient with his passes. And again, as I mentioned, like, he has 3 of his last 4 seasons, he's been over 65 or 66% actually. Wow. of his completion percentage. So, last year was a down year, but again, you take Ridley out for most of the year and you're simply throwing to Kyle Pitts. That's why he only had 20 touchdowns. He hadn't had anything less than that over the 3 prior seasons, and he had 35 in 2018.
It's good stuff. Nate, you believe in Zach Wilson?
So here's why I think that I'll get to Zach Wilson in a second, but why Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going 17 picks ahead of Matt Ryan. And I think it's name, and I think it's perception based off of name. Trevor Lawrence still is a shiny new toy. Matt Ryan, has, kind of some dirt on his face.
Old and busted.
Yeah. And so this gets to be to the Zach Wilson. Now we're getting into a decision that I just don't want to make. And I would probably, and this is the main reason why I am a void on Matt Ryan, because I'm not taking a QB there. I'm probably going, a different position. Honestly, I play a lot of IDP. I would be looking at the IDP alternatives and I would get a QB, later in that draft. So like these choices, I probably would just like say, I don't want to make them.
Well, to be fair, Wilson is going 21 picks after Matt Ryan. So there's between Lawrence and Zach Wilson, there's a 3-round gap. So
gotcha.
That's fair.
And where did you say
of those guys that are behind Matt Ryan in ADP, the only one that I would legitimately feel comfortable grabbing as a starter over Matt Ryan is the guy he's replacing, Carson Wentz.
Mm. Where's Goff in this again?
Super late. 27th, 182, another 13 picks behind Zach Wilson.
Yeah. See,
so you just wait and take Jared Goff.
Yeah, I would just wait and take Jared Goff, to be honest. And I know that's
Joe is here right now to just eviscerate that decision.
Well, I'm not much of a fan, but for that price and for what I can do with my team, for not making that decision there and getting something that I think would be comparable. And
And what's interesting in a lot of the startup mocks I did, 2QB mocks I did, Jared Goff was always that guy that someone got super late after everybody else took 3 quarterbacks. And they're like, well, I guess I'll take Jared Goff. But he's an NFL starter who's not going to lose his job this year. There's something in that for 2QB redraft leagues. I, for one, would take Zach Wilson over Matt Ryan. I actually am bought into the Zach Wilson rebound. I like the weapons there. I think they're going to be a better football team. I like the coaching staff there. I like what they're doing. I did just want to throw out quickly for Matt Ryan. For me, Josh, you've kind of hit on this a couple of times. He's just a better completion percentage than Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz was a top 12 quarterback last year. Why can't Ryan do the same thing? And so that would be my argument pro Matt Ryan. But we've done enough on the offensive side of the ball, and we like to twist these shows towards our guest. And with Nate being the IDP guy, we want to go, who is your favorite defensive IDP player? I'm reading this too quickly, for the Indianapolis Colts.
For Colts, it's definitely Darius Leonard. If you're just talking straight football, and if I were to have gotten him on my dynasty league, or when I did pull him off the waiver wire in redraft, eons ago at this point, like he's a beast, and he's a great guy to root for. So definitely him. And if I'm talking about like fantasy wise, because Darius Leonard, his price tag is ridiculous to try and grab him, I would go DeForest Buckner, if in a DT league.
And there needs to be some kind of specification there, because you don't typically play DTs in a straight defensive line league, correct?
Correct. I mean, he is someone that could be like a DL2 or a backup and be all right, but no, in a DT league he is DT2, I think.
There you go. So I'll just jump into Joe's IDP stash. We also have his sleeper, but his IDP stash, and he's complimenting you on the great job you did. You essentially took all of his guys, so he just went different. He went Yannick Ngakoue, and he's prefaced it for sack heavy leagues, because Ngakoue is not going to rack up a bunch of tackles, should get the sacks for you. And in leagues where sacks are heavy, almost like touchdowns, that's kind of what you want out of your defensive linemen. But he did give compliments to you. He basically said, DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, these are the guys he's playing opposite from, so the attention's going to go to them. Plus Leonard in the middle. He's going to have a lot of open spots to shoot through the offensive line. So he likes Yannick Ngakoue. Is that a good pick?
Yeah, definitely for the sack heavy leagues, because like he said, he doesn't have stable tackle numbers, which is what you really want in like a tackle heavy or a balanced league. But also, a very good matchup player. So when, if you're streaming your defensive line, he's a good guy to have in that rotation.
All right. And Joe's biggest sleeper is Ashton Doolin. This is based on ADP. Basically, he just put Paris Campbell is going to get hurt. It's an inevitability. And Doolin is going to be the next slot wide receiver up in that offense, with Michael Pittman going to the outside. So, Josh, do you have anything you want to add to the Colts before we move on to the Chargers?
I do not. Let's get it.
Let's jump on to the Chargers. Another 9-8 team. Actually, all of our teams this week are 9-8. We just hit positive record last week, and now we're going to get all positive records. Same coach, Brandon Staley. Same offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi. For the players with the most upside, Josh has Mike Williams. I have Isaiah Spiller, a crush I've had since the day of the draft. Player who is the biggest trap, Josh has Austin Eckler, and he says it hurts him to say that. For me, it also hurts, and I had to preface that this is about ADP, and there's a great article about this on our website right now. It's Justin Herbert. It's a trap in the 4th round. We'll get to that, I'm sure, quite a bit. In fact, we're going to get to it right now, because for Nate, we asked you if there is one player you would have to leave the draft with from the Chargers, and you gave us 3. So go ahead and start talking about these guys, and we'll talk a little bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes it's difficult to narrow these questions down, and depending on different things, I think, going one way or the other. So Justin Herbert, he's one of those QBs you kind of get a crush on, when his rookie year, he came out, set records, and was just absolutely amazing. And while he is pricey, he's one of those guys that I wouldn't necessarily mind paying up for, just from he's been pretty consistent the past couple years, and that's something you want. And he's young. I mean, from a dynasty perspective, absolutely want your younger QBs. I also said Austin Eckler, and as I put that down, I have been in a couple drafts where I have not gotten Austin Eckler. So I'm kind of rethinking that one a little bit. I think his price tag is starting to go up higher than I remember it being like last year. And so, I probably will, I'll take that one back. And then
before you get into defense, I was going to let Josh talk a little bit about Eckler, because I know Josh loves Eckler and you see the price tag rising. So Josh, is that your issue with Austin Eckler as well?
Well, that's part of it. He's currently going right now as RB2, simply just behind Jonathan Taylor. We know how great Jonathan Taylor was. Like he's surpassed Alvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Najee, all these guys. And again, love Eckler, absolutely love him. I love what he means to the fantasy community. I mean, he has an award-winning show with one of our favorites, Liz Loza. He's absolutely embraced his culture, and it pains me to feel like I'm slandering him this way. But if I were to go through and read off his rushing totals through 5 years in this league, tell me something that stands out. 47 rushes, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. 106 rushing attempts, 554 yards, 3 touchdowns. 132 rushing attempts, 557 yards, 3 touchdowns. 116 rushing attempts, 530 yards, 1 touchdown. 206 rushing attempts, 911 yards, 12 touchdowns.
I think the
tell me that doesn't feel like a weird anomaly to you.
Yeah.
Like you see things like this spike all the time, and then right when we buy into the hype, it crashes like the 1920 stock market. Like it just feel like and I know he's not purposely trying to do this, but I feel like we as a community are setting ourselves up for this type of crash. I don't want to believe it. I really, really don't. But when you've never totaled, he has one. I will take this back. In 2019, he did have 11 total touchdowns. So maybe last year wasn't the anomaly that maybe I'm trying to make it out to be. Because again, we kind of like foresaw this when Joe Lombardi came in. It was like Austin Eckler is going to play this Alvin Kamara role. And he did it to perfection. He had 94 targets, 70 receptions, 20 total touchdowns, totaled over 1,500 yards. Like, that's what we wanted. And that's why he finished as high as he did in fantasy. But then it becomes, he was an undrafted free agent once upon a time. He's now running 27 years old. Like, this just kind of feels like this weird little cliff that, all right, he's at the apex now. Can he really go up even higher? And I feel like we've already seen that ceiling. So I just think right now his price is just way too high. I mean, I would rather have Dalvin Cook. I would rather have Joe Mixon, obviously Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. You can make an argument for Najee. Like there are plenty of running backs that I think I would rather have than pay that type of price for Austin Eckler right now.
And I agree the price is the issue, because he stats out as my RB3, and I do have the touchdowns going down, but I feel like the passing work is so safe. That's what's going to keep him where he is. I'm not concerned he's going to lose passing work. I didn't know he had got up to RB2. So I think I had the same sticker shock as Nate here, where I'm like, okay, hold on a second, because I'll defend Austin Eckler forever, but I'm not taking him over Christian McCaffrey. Austin Eckler is not a game winner. Christian McCaffrey is a game winner. Christian McCaffrey puts up QB points from running back.
Also a game loser.
Hey, he's usually out early in the week, so you just have to go find another guy at that point. Chuba Hubbard. So.
That's not going to work out too well for you. He didn't do great last year.
he wins on the bench a lot. But no, so if you go back, like I'm remembering, I do a lot of mock drafting, a lot of just drafting in general. So like going back to last year, Austin Eckler was a guy you could get close to the turn, at the end of your snake, the first round into the second round. And then doing a startup draft, like literally before the show, and I was at the 5th spot, and I was making a decision between Eckler and Jamar Chase, and kind of surprised I was making that, but I was almost okay. Like I was wrestling with it, but I was like kind of okay with it. And then Eckler goes right before my pick. And I was like, one, thank
In
you
a
for
dynasty
making that
startup?
easy.
Yeah.
No, it was redraft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
You said
just
startup. I instantly thought dynasty.
Yeah,
too,
I was like,
so.
no, please don't do that. Okay, now I'm with you. All right.
yeah. No, it was redraft, and I was just a little surprised. Like, we get to talking about it now, and it's just like really thinking about it. I was like, man, like that you wouldn't have seen that last year. I don't know if I would have seen that earlier in this year necessarily.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We're starting to get to that point in the summer where your standard home leagues are starting to like kind of prepare and do their mocks, right? And all they're seeing is 20 touchdowns. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what they're glued to, right? You see it, it's the name value. It's the production. Boom, I gotta have that. Not wanting to realize that what goes up must come down. Like that's kind of Newton's law, isn't it? Or some other science term I'm probably not remembering because I didn't do great in science in school. But that's kind of the whole perception here with these ADPs. Like, so much of it is based on last year's stats and not thinking, okay, what can potentially go wrong? Where's the risk to the reward part of it? This offense has kept everybody in place. So I understand the idea that, well, they did it last year. Why the hell can't they do it again this year? But maybe not everybody stays healthy. What happens if Herbert takes a small step back? What happens if we don't get contract year Mike Williams again? What happens if Keenan Allen acts like a 36-year-old wide receiver who's been in the league 9 years instead of, a 29-year-old wide receiver who's been in the league 8 years? Like there's different realms of possibilities that could potentially happen to this offense to make it dovetail. And nobody is baking that into any of these pricing points.
And that's the point I was going to kind of move over to the defense with this offense. And, I believe this is probably our guy, Zach. There's no indication, but loves Herbert, hates his ADP. And that's essentially what his article was about today, was the ADP for all these guys. They were great and they were fun last year when they were cheap. And they're not that anymore. Herbert is a 4th round QB2. Austin Eckler is apparently the 2nd pick of your damn draft. No, thank you. But even my guy, Keenan Allen, who it hurts me to say anything ill of Keenan Allen.
But when I was 10 right now,
wide receiver 10, when he was the wide receiver 11 last year. Why is he getting better? Like, I don't understand what we're doing to ourselves here. I love Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen was my favorite person to draft in the 4th and 5th damn round, not early in the 3rd round. We're losing the value in that we're losing the value. They're not fun when I have to pay up for them. When Keenan Allen has to be my wide receiver 1, I want him as my wide receiver 2. Why can't I do that anymore? So,
well, and that's why I like Mike Williams at his ADP, because his ADP is at wide receiver 20 right now. He finished as a top 12 wide receiver last year. There's room to grow. Again, if we get contract year Mike Williams this year, if he stays healthy, he's going to return value at wide receiver 20. But I mean, and again, it's always, will they stay healthy? This is a violent game. I get it. We always want to project that people are going to stay healthy. It just doesn't always end that way. History is not on Mike Williams' side that he's going to stay healthy all year. We got a great season out of him last year. I definitely want to see it again. But his ability to get downfield and go up for those 50-50 balls, that's why you like him. That's why you want to draft him. And right now, to me, of all of these top-tier Chargers offensive weapons, he is the best value for what we've already seen. Ryan, I agree with you that Isaiah Spiller is a great value, but he needs to take that job.
Yeah, you got
because right now he doesn't have it.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to talk Spiller up that much. Basically, there's a lot of touches behind Austin Eckler that are up for grabs, and I think they're all going to go to Spiller. People who are complaining he's a day 3 back, he's competing with other day 3 backs. It's not like he has anybody big to beat out there. Before we jump over to defense, I want to give one last shout out to Zach, who it is in the chat. He just dropped his Justin Herbert article today, and one of his big points there was he did this actually in the article for you. If you take a 4th round wide receiver and a 10th round quarterback, and then the vice versa, a 4th round quarterback, Justin Herbert, and a 10th round wide receiver, you're going to win with the less volatile wide receiver in the 4th round and the safer quarterback in the 10th round every time. And that's really just focusing on draft value and positional scarcity. There are a ton of quarterbacks who score basically the same amount of points. You have to just take advantage of that when you're drafting in fantasy. Let's jump over to IDP, and your last guy who is on this must-leave list is also your favorite IDP from the Saints. So before we talk about the guy you're avoiding, let's talk about your favorite, Derwin James.
Yeah. On the Chargers for sure. Like, Derwin James, he's been, one of those safety crushes that, we've had for years. The problem is, sometimes he gets injured, and he got injured last year and, kind of disappeared. So coming into this year is, having him back and ready to go. That's, he is. A lot of us that have been playing IDP know like his track record, but he gets forgotten because of that that time off. And so his price tag is awesome. It's amazing, and that just makes him, a guy to grab, because you might be able to get him if you're lucky as your safety too. If you really kind of push it, but if you get him as your safety 1, you should feel pretty confident. As Chris says here, Derwin is the heart and soul of that defense.
Absolutely. Now, what's interesting is you're saying in drafts, because of his injury scarcity, he's falling to where people are landing him as their second safety on their own team.
So if you get lucky, you could probably do it.
Interesting.
If you're the only one really paying attention, that's a possibility. I don't think that's happening everywhere, but you might be able to get him later.
Because in most scoring formats, he was the overall DB1 last year, correct?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Nate, you mentioned that he did get hurt. Yeah, so he missed all of 2020.
Yeah,
with an injury
last year,
after missing 11 games in 2019.
Okay,
he did miss 2 games last year, so you weren't technically wrong.
Yeah, he's still missing.
Did miss games, but he didn't miss as many as I think.
Well, the only cautionary tale I'll throw to drafters is there's another Los Angeles Charger that had some early injuries, and people started mistakenly calling him injury prone. And now he's the best damn route runner in fantasy football, Keenan Allen, who's being overdrafted everywhere. Don't get freaked out because the guy has early injuries. I feel like we do this far too often. And like you just said, he went from not being on the field to the best DB scorer last year. Take advantage of that. Don't let that scare you in your drafts. But you also had on there, obviously, you're going to take Derwin James. You had that you're avoiding Bosa, which I found interesting.
Well, okay, so I do mark that that's an MFL. So in my fantasy league, they moved Bosa to a linebacker, which completely kills his value. Okay. And so if you're one of those guys that, maybe you jump over to MFL, you jump between different league sites, and, you see yourself in MFL and Bosa's there, just caution, make sure that you're in true position league. And, if not, don't grab linebacker Bosa, definitely grab defensive end Bosa.
Interesting. So yeah,
that's actually a really good point, Nate, that you bring up, because it's when we talk about this all the time, know your league, know your site, know your settings. And it goes to, you see this sort of positional influence, I think, more on the defensive side with IDB players than you do with offensive players. Like we had on Sleeper last year, Cordero Patterson was a wide receiver and a running back. And that kind of upped his value that much more, because you could slot a running back production into your wide receiver spot. It's kind of similar that, TJ Watt is a defensive end and a linebacker on Sleeper. And that's what makes him so great, because he laps all of the linebackers because of those enormous sack totals. Yep. So Nate, you bring up know your settings, Bosa Absolutely. On MFL as a linebacker, just make sure that, you're paying attention to where the classification lies on your site.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. And I think that all of us, we're all degenerates at this game. We're combing through the bylaws and the, all the settings to make sure that we're, optimized. So, we don't really have to say it to you all, but, for those guys out there, especially in redraft, just make sure you know what's going on. because that can vary your team. You know, your draft strategy, the whole thing. So.
Well, one other thing I'm noticing on Sleeper right now, I'm in an IDP mock on Sleeper, and actually, I think Nate, you're in there with me. The IDP scoring, I don't know if it's weird scoring. I don't believe that it is. The highest IDP is projected to get 24 total fantasy points. So if you're not paying attention in that league, they're never going to come up on your ADP.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know that
So-
Sleeper actually plugs in IDP projections, because I've seen that even when we did the 4-Eye Championship last year, like,
and
in
it's
the
with the
draft
4-Eyed
itself.
crew that we're doing this
Yeah.
right now.
So you know, it's one of those things where if you don't know IDP, like, follow IDP Guys, follow Fantasy and Frames, follow these sites that can help you and give you these types of tiered rankings for these position players, because sites don't project defensive players. They just don't. You're just kind of expected to know who to draft.
Let's get into some deep theory. We got a few seconds before we have to jump over to the Saints, and I do mean have to jump over to the Saints. Nate, when do you look to start taking an IDP player in general? Like, I have my theory on, I'll just say my theory at first. So TJ Watt in the 4-Eyed Championship last year, I was able to plug in my own custom scoring and saw how much more TJ Watt was going to outscore other defensive linemen. I earmarked him for the 5th. I did a couple of mocks with the Fantasy and Frame guys that I was going to take him in the 5th, and it worked every time. And I got him in my draft in the 5th. That felt early, and nobody else really took another defensive player until like the 7th or 8th. So do you have like a zone where you go in and you start looking IDP when offensive players are involved?
Yeah. So specifically, this goes back to knowing your settings, knowing the league, because if you it's all very relative. If you play in a league where the IDP scoring is pretty minimal and you're only starting, like, say it's just a single D slot, like, I'm not even picking a IDP in that league. You know, I'll
It's
pick
like the kicker
you
at
know,
that
I'll
point.
stream off the I won't even have to stream. Like, I'll just grab somebody off the waiver wire and they'll be good enough to pretty much, you know, last the season. So I want to look at my settings and see where the comparison between offensive scoring to defensive scoring. And while I don't know the Fantasy and Frame scoring very well, or you know, that league that you were in, TJ Watt goes super early. Like, if you didn't grab him in the 5th, you probably weren't getting him, and he generally will go right now a couple rounds ahead of the rest of the IDP.
Yeah, I think his overall point total last year would have put him at like RB6. Like, if you're putting it, you know, kind of like ranked like total points there, like, he would have been that valuable, which is very similar to taking Travis Kelce in the first round, because you get that positional, you know, advantage because Kelce just laps the competition at the tight end position.
I mean, there were weeks last year when I had TJ Watt that he scored more than my quarterback. And so, like, why wouldn't I, you know, if that's what I wanted to do? And I think last year I lucked out, and you know, because Darius Leonard, Devin White, these guys were going up there, and then TJ Watt was after, so I was able to kind of pull that guy in, because years, you know, for a couple years before that, you know, he was more of that sack dependent, not totally sack dependent, but it was a little more of like, you know, TJ Watt is more of an edge rusher than a linebacker, so you want to get a pure linebacker over him. And then last year, he just blew that whole thing out of the water and had high tackle numbers, high sack numbers, and was, I mean, if you want to talk about a league winner, like, that guy is it. So, you know, to get back to your point of like, when do I draft? Generally, looking at my scoring, I will try and fill out my offense as much as I can, as much as I feel comfortable first. If it's really high scoring for defense, you know, maybe I'll get my running back, my RB1, my wide receiver one, and then maybe like a TJ Watt, a defensive end, like a Myles Garrett, you know, go along those lines, try and get like a top tier player there. But if it's kind of like just normal balanced scoring, I'm probably waiting to the 6th, maybe into the 7th round. But I do want to plug something here. You were talking about it
Please
earlier with, following IDP guys and different resources. We put out the IDP draft kit. This was a culmination of a partnership between Dynasty Football Factory, the IDP show, and IDP guys. And one of the cool things that came out of this, it's a redraft IDP draft kit that is kind of a complement to the Footballers Ultimate Draft Kit. So you can get both and have like everything you need, but printable tier sheets.
Ooh.
Where this will be updated over the course of the summer. And I love print design and everything. I tried to make it just so easy to go through, find your guys, and be ready for your league. And that's probably like the coolest thing that comes out of that kit.
That's awesome.
So, and that really helps when it comes down to, when to grab players. Those tier sheets are invaluable.
Well, I say Josh said it best earlier in the show. If you're stepping into IDP for the first time and you're intimidated or you're afraid to, use your resources. They are out there, and something like that will save you a massive amount of headaches, because you don't just want to take guys because you've heard of them. Scoring matters, and that's where it's really going to come into play, with knowing your league scoring and knowing that sort of stuff. So thank you. That was great. So we're going to finish up with the Saints, another 9-8 team. While they
skipped over Joe's sleeper and IDP.
Oh, I did. Thank you so much. Yeah. I am just terrible. So
I mean, we kind of skip over it anyway because he's not here to.
Yeah, I'll quickly say though, it's Kenneth Murray, and he's just trying to stay different from Nate again. It's the 3rd year in the league for Murray, and he's been consistently good. Another guy he likes is Jerry Tillery. Now that Sebastian Joseph Day is going to be helping clog up the middle, he thinks Tillery's going to have more space and potential more 1v1 scenarios. And for his sleeper, he basically said whoever the 3rd wide receiver on the depth chart is. And that's because they're going to get to play on, he says the slot, but I don't think it's so much going to be the slot, because Keenan Allen will be in the slot, but they're going to play opposite Mike Williams. They're going to get a couple of deep touchdowns. And then when Mike Williams inevitably gets hurt, this seems to be Joe's running theme at this point. When Mike Williams gets hurt, that person will slide into the wide receiver 2 role. So you're looking for either Josh Palmer or Jalen Guyton, whichever one.
For what it's worth, Josh Palmer had one more target last year than Jalen.
Well, I was going to say, this is where you definitely want to follow training camp news, because someone's likely to emerge and you got to figure out who it is. So we will jump over to the Saints. 9-8, new head coach, but it's last year's defensive coordinator, and then they kept their same offensive coordinator. So Dennis Allen is now the head coach. Pete Carmichael remains as the offensive coordinator. So don't expect a lot of change, even with Sean Payton gone. It's not going to be a very different team. For player with the most upside, Josh and I ended up going with Jarvis Landry both. I will tell a quick story. I answered these from my gut and originally put Michael Thomas as my player with the most upside. And then I saw his ADP, and I'm going to have a stern talking to with all of you here very soon. For the biggest trap player, Josh has Alvin Kamara. He's likely to miss 6 games, and he's going in the top 10 right now with ADP. It's probably going to drop once the suspension actually becomes a full-blown thing. But until then, it's a problem. And then Josh said the same thing as me. Wide receiver 24 is crazy for Michael Thomas. I have almost word for word the exact same thing. So me and Josh are in lockstep when it comes to the Saints. We're going to move over to Nate. So the one player you want to leave your draft with, you stuck with IDP with this one. So go ahead and talk to us.
Yeah, I will say that there's not a lot of choices that I looked at that I wanted on the Saints.
On the offense either.
yeah. Marcus Davenport, though, defensive end. He's one of the the higher tier defensive ends on that team, and I was grasping at straws here a little bit, and that's the guy. If you leave your draft with him, at least you've got a defensive end 1 right there that should be a every week play.
Well, we'll stick with the defense, and then we'll jump into the offense a little bit. So even though you have him as the player you want to leave with, Cam Jordan is still your favorite player for IDP leagues?
So, okay. This works with redraft. I do like Cam Jordan as well. So Marcus Davenport was a little bit more of a dynasty focus.
Yeah.
Cam Jordan would be probably right there with him for redraft, but he's also just like one of my top favorite players. We're talking about favorite defensive players. I went less on the fantasy like playing side and more of the fantasy rooting side.
Okay.
I like Cam Jordan. He's older, that's where for dynasty you want, Marcus Davenport over him, but he's still good for redraft right now. And just he can be a very electric player.
I think we're all going to tell the same story for Alvin Kamara, but Josh, I'm going to start with you because you haven't talked in a while. So Alvin Kamara is Nate's player to avoid. It's both of our trap players. The ADP is out of control right now. Is it just the ADP? Is it just the suspension?
Yeah, for me, that's really what it boils down to. I mean, could he end up playing 10 games and still finish as a top 10 running back? Absolutely. Alvin Kamara is that good. I didn't really get a chance to dive too much into what Kamara's production was like with Jameis Winston, but we know how good Kamara is. And I don't really think that he's hit any sort of age wall at the running back position because he's just so good at avoiding hard contact. And he's never really been used as a, between the tackles, 200 plus carry running back.
I was going to say, yeah, even last year was a high carry mark for him, if I remember correctly, because that was one of the knocks is that he wasn't carrying the ball a ton.
Yeah, so I think the first year that he really had heavy carry usage was the one year that I think it was Ingram's first year gone. And he his yards per carry really suffered. I think it was down to last year he was down to 3.7. He had 240 rushing attempts. I mean, that kind of tells the story in a nutshell, really. But touchdowns just weren't there last year, and that's something that Kamara has been known for. I mean, his rookie year 13, the year after that 18, 2 years ago 21. Jameis Winston, obviously isn't Drew Brees. He's not going to be near as efficient. And, even in those 7 starts that he had, they weren't high touchdown numbers, but Jameis got it done from a winning perspective. So, I think that's why they were, more than willing to be all right, we'll flirt with this guy, but we'll fall back on Jameis if we have to, which is ultimately what they ended up doing. So, Kamara is still going to be a focus, but, Ingram is there. They brought him back midseason from Houston, I believe. And they spent a draft pick on someone else. I think it was a day 3 pick. So, I don't anticipate them going the 240 carry route again with Alvin Kamara, because at the end of the day, he's most effective when he can get 4.5 to 5 yards per rushing attempt. When he has the reception totals, I mean, he averages 8.7 yards per catch in his career. He's had 81, 81, 81, 83 receptions. And then last year, 47, absolutely fell off a cliff from a receiving perspective. We know that Jameis doesn't typically target running backs, but that's how this offense is effective. You have to get the ball in Alvin Kamara's hands.
So I quickly looked up the numbers. I don't have the raw numbers. I just have the ranking. He was the RB6 in the 7 games that Jameis started last year. So it's not awful. My question to you, Nate, is when are we comfortable taking him? Because he was the RB8 in just 13 games played last year. So if we're looking for him to jump down to 11 games on a 6-game suspension, obviously we need to fade him, but how far do we need to fade Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, and the main reason I'm avoiding him is just because there's so much up in the air with what is the suspension going to be? What is the legal outcome going to? I have been too jaded by Michael Thomas's, Calvin Ridley's. It's just so many players that you jump in on them and you love them, and then they get into trouble. And next thing you know, you've got them on your bench for most of the year. So I do want to give a shout out to Drew Davenport. He does a really good job of keeping up on, all of these legal situations. He is a lawyer. So he tries to give that the information through that lens of what things mean. So with that, there's going to be someone that pulls the trigger on Alvin Kamara before me. And I don't really know how low, I guess if I'm looking at my RB3 and he's there, I might consider it just because that's replaceable. But Alvin Kamara always commands a price tag of, an RB1. I haven't really seen the ADP, since most of the news came out and the projected
Yeah, I haven't
loss of
seen what
time.
it dropped, but he's still falling at 10 right now, which is just ridiculous. And so you brought up Drew. I want to bring up one interesting thing that Drew said was, if you looked at that report where they're bracing for a 6-game suspension, that didn't come from anyone, where essentially how Drew put it was, this situation is the same as it was last week. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So don't dive into this like he's going to miss 6 games, which I thought was an interesting take on the entire situation. So,
right. And that's, I'm pretty sure I saw that too. And that's where I'm just like, I'm keeping open mind of like, he could be gone all year, if that's what I'm not an expert, so I don't know. And I don't want to invest in someone that, if you're talking redraft, like that's just a wasted draft pick right there,
in the first round.
So, yeah, I don't know if I'm taking him. I couldn't pull the trigger in the first round at all. I'll let someone else take that gamble 100%. And like I said, probably he'd have to really drop for me. Like,
what was the year that Ezekiel Elliott got suspended and he only played like 10 games? I'm just trying to remember really quick. I think it was his second year in the league, right? 2017.
I was going to say, I think it's
sounds about right.
2017.
I think it was 2017. All right.
I do want to say Kamara dropped to the 6. Now, you bring up Zeke, and this was an interesting thing that we kind of talked about in the Football Guys chat today is, what if the suspension gets fought and then gets pushed later into the season? I feel like that's even more devastating for fantasy managers.
Well, that's essentially what happened with Zeke.
Exactly.
He ended up playing those 10 games in 2017. He still finished as RB12. So, and when you put him at points per game, he was RB3 in that realm. So, like, I'm not saying that again, Kamara can still finish as an RB1. But you look at Zeke's ADP that year, it definitely slipped into the second, sometimes even in the third round, just kind of depending on your league and how confident or not confident they were in how much play they would get from Zeke. Obviously, you're talking about 2 very different types of running backs because one, Zeke was, more of an in-between the tackles runner, got targets, but Kamara lives through the passing game. So, and we talk all the time, targets can be more valuable and really are more valuable than rushing attempts. So you could make the case that, maybe you are drafting him at his floor at this point.
My concern with that is it depends on how you're going to build your team, because losing your RB1 for the entire playoff run hurts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he's not good, a possibility, if he's not good, he has no trade value whatsoever, because everybody knows he's fighting the suspension. Everybody knows he's likely to miss games 10 through 16. They're not going to give you shit for this guy because he's had a couple of bad weeks. So you're just stuck with this, and you can't cut him because you just blew a 2nd round pick, the 3rd pick of the 2nd round on him. So he just puts you in a rough situation. I think, Nate, you said it best, is like, let's let it be someone else's headache. There are other players there. I don't know if it's still, but that's usually around when Joe Mixon goes in a draft. And so by all means, give me DeAndre Swift and Joe Mixon over a guy like Alvin Kamara right now. It's rough, and it's not.
Yeah, and those are the 2 guys that right now are going directly ahead of Kamara, Mixon, Swift, and then you've got Javonte Chubb and Aaron Jones right after.
Now, Josh, you brought up, once the news becomes official, we'll likely see a drop in the Kamara ADP, and that's why he's not really the trap anymore. What the hell is going on with Michael Thomas as the wide receiver 24 in fantasy football? It makes absolutely no sense to me. For those who don't remember, yes, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Michael Thomas was the best wide receiver in fantasy football. Then he got hurt and basically quit on his team, couldn't get over the injury, got surgeries at a weird time where it ended up affecting his entire 2021 season. So now he's back in 2022. And by back, I mean that he is watching practice because he's not healthy enough to practice yet, but we're gambling on him as the wide receiver 24 in fantasy football. Does anybody have an answer of why this is happening? Nate?
Name value. That's literally what it is.
Name value and redraft folks waking up that Yeah, it's early in the season. It's going to be more the degenerates, but as we get closer to August, it's going to be those casual fans that come in and go, oh, Michael Thomas, I'll take him because,
he helped me win a championship 3 years ago.
Right. Or, they come in and think, I know what's going to happen and he's going to go back and be awesome because, for, whatever, no real good reason. So that's kind of gotta be it for me because I'm out on Michael Thomas.
I'm way out. Been way out.
So
not it.
What worries me is I'm looking at the ADP, and FFC is what, like the Fantasy Football Championship, correct? Which is usually a pretty high stakes tournament. And he's the wide receiver 17 there. These are people who are paying a lot of money for their teams. What is going on? So I
wish I had that kind of disposable income to blow on, Michael Thomas is a wide receiver 17.
Yeah, you gotta keep in mind though, every league has at least 11 losers.
There you go. Well, I wonder if there's some sort of game theory that goes into it as well, that if everybody else is wrong and I'm right, that's what's going to set me apart in these big tournaments. I mean, I don't buy it whatsoever, but I like the 11 losers thing. That's an interesting take on fantasy football in general.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a DFS kind of, it's similar to DFS where you're trying to stand out and be a little bit different. So, I could definitely see that as a big time gamble. And if you're already putting up that money, you're gambling with it. So why not go big? But I don't know. These are some of the decisions that are difference makers to winning championships, and I'd rather be safe and consistent than boom or bust.
Well, I would go a step further. Safe and consistent is avoiding Alvin Kamara. Dumb is taking Michael Thomas as the wide receiver 20. It's just a bad decision. If you just want to throw that money away, send it my way. I'll be more than happy to take it. So Joe's biggest sleeper for the team is Jarvis Landry. If we expect Jameis Winston of old and he's going to be throwing the ball all the time, Landry is going to catch a lot of balls. He's going to run the underneath routes, and that's what Jameis is going to throw. And he's going to get the occasional trick play for touchdowns. It should be a very fun thing to watch Jarvis Landry. For my notes, I basically put, you remember all those things that you liked watching Michael Thomas do? Jarvis Landry can do those too. So Michael Thomas can watch him. And then his IDP stash is Marcus May. Basically, he said he crushed it when he was with the Jets, and now he moves over to a better defense in a worse division. His turnover opportunities are going to be through the roof. So do you have anything to add on Marcus May on defense?
Yeah, absolutely. He was someone when I was picking my my players that I eyeballed. That move is just, it was a little bit too not too much for me. I'm not very abreast of the situation, so I didn't want to grab him, but he was amazing with the Jets, so I could definitely see it.
Makes sense. So guys, that's it. We did it. We got through the show. All winning records for the first time this season. We don't know if the Saints are going to
finally getting to the teams to talk about. Yay!
I was going to say, it's going to be a lot more fun for the rest of the summer. Not that it wasn't fun beforehand. We've had great guests. They can make the worst teams sound really, really fun. So first and foremost, Nate, thank you so much. Short notice. You come on the show. You crush it. You give us dynasty stuff. You give us a ton of IDP stuff. This is basically our second IDP show, which is why we saw Josh's eyes glossing over, and Joe is probably green with jealous rage at home right now that he wasn't here. So Nate, please tell everybody where they can find you. Tell them where they can find your stuff, everything you're working on, the stuff your team's working on. You're such a good champion for your own team as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing me on. And, it's interesting talking about these teams rather than usually I get brought on for the Lions, takes. And
that's Howard Bender. We stick him with the Lions.
No. We did Heath Cummings for that one this year.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Bender
so that's a little
bit
more of a depressing conversation. Yeah. I felt like these topics were, a little bit better. Not necessarily, we're not talking. I'd love to talk Matthew Stafford and the Rams, but this was better than the lowly Lions there. But you can find me on Twitter at Nate Cheat. I'm the founder and a co-owner of IDP Guys, idpguys.org. Definitely check out that site. And if you're interested in IDP, we have a ton of resources out there for dynasty, redraft. Our rankings are probably some of the deepest available that are combined IDP and offense, as well as we cultivate our own ADP. There's just so much that we do at that site, and get into our Discord chat, because honestly, that's where we just have league winners pretty much in that chat. People that are
the 11 losers aren't there.
People that are most active and get the most out of that literally have almost 24/7 concierge service for their leagues, and we're doing stuff every year more and more. This year we added in a VIP status for some members, and our guys will actually come on and have a video call with you to go over your roster, to draft with you if you wanted. Pretty much, we're trying to take care of those that are committed to us and like becoming subscribers with us, because that's helping us into the future. There's so many plans and so much stuff that we have going on that we will be hoping to share as soon as like the expo that's coming up. So that's a lot of great stuff with the IDP guys. Love my team there. We share a few people, Steve Lawson. I was trying to throw his Twitter handle in there and I don't remember. I think it's like FF Steve or something.
FF by committee.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yep.
And then Faith,
yes,
FF of Faith. She is our editor over there and she does an amazing job. Both of those people, that we share do awesome work. So definitely want to shout them out. One of the big things that I'm going on a bunch of shows and promoting is I have a new project that is just me coming up here that I've been teasing on Twitter, and I've got a YouTube channel and stuff, but it is a coaching website for content creators. Essentially, there aren't a lot of resources, and I know when I first started, while I went to college for like graphic design, journalism, and that kind of stuff, outside of the classroom, there wasn't much information out there on how to set up a YouTube channel, how to get going, creating a website, and creating content and having my own space and navigating equipment issues, Patreon and PayPal versus like owning your own payment processing, those kind of issues that are out there. I'm trying to collect that information, create a website that has tutorials, courses. I'm going to be launching a course, start to finish, do-it-yourself website building, and that you'll be able to follow along and launch your own site. And right now, I've been doing interviews for the podcast that'll come out with this, and talking to some of the leaders in our especially the fantasy football community. Granted, my site goes beyond that into anyone that's creating content for any reason. But guys like Ken Moody, DLF, Detroit Beastie, Chris, who's in the chat, Calvin and Hobby, DLF, main YouTube guy, YouTube host. And I just wrapped up with Jeff Risden, who is a managing editor for USA Today Wire site for the Lions, and he's done it for a few others. But just from the perspective of helping people get better at their craft and really achieving the goals that they have, because not everyone wants to work at ESPN or make it into the NFL as a media coordinator. Some people just want to have a group of people that they can hang out with and enjoy, and I'm here to help you create that community and reach that level.
So where is everybody going to find that content? Because I know you said that's independent of IDP guys. So do they need to be following you on Twitter personally, or is there another place?
So definitely follow me personally. I'll be tweeting out like information as it comes through. It'll be housed at contentdesigncoach.com, which will be launching early summer. It keeps kind of getting pushed back, is like I have other clients. I do I have a design agency, so stuff comes up, and I've been kind of building this in my spare time. But it is, I mean, the website is like 90% done. I've got 5 long form, like Joe Rogan style podcasts that are in the hopper right now, just needing to be edited up. And then it'll start releasing. And I also, if you do go to the FF Expo, I will be doing a breakout session on starting your own website. And
It's awesome.
that's kind of the integration there is, I'm building out the content design coach, and then part of the launch will be this breakout session.
Perfect. Well, make sure you guys are following Nate, because if you're looking to break into this industry, we see these questions on Twitter all the time, and a Twitter thread is great, but YouTube videos are going to really show and tell, which is, I think, a way easier way to learn. So thank you again, Nate. That's great stuff, man.
Yeah.
All right. So we are fully into our Look Inside series on the show and on the website. So make sure you're checking the website out, because every time we cover a team on the show, we have a player spotlight article going up on the website where one of our great writers just dives into a player, helps you decide their fantasy value for the 2022 season. And at the end of those articles, self-promotion, Josh or I break down the rest of the team. So the writers can focus on one player. Josh and I give you our opinions on the rest of the team. And my goodness, is this a long list that I'm going to read quickly. So we have articles.
I was about to say, you don't have to hit all of them. Joe never
I'm
does.
going to, because maybe someone's going to hear this name and go check these out. So we have articles on Travis Etienne, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Cooks, Breece Hall, Kadarius Toney, DJ Moore, Khalil Herbert, Kyle Pitts, Jerry Jeudy, DK Metcalf, Antonio Gibson, Irv Smith, David Njoku, J.K. Dobbins, Tua Tagovailoa, Michael Pittman, and Justin Herbert just dropped today. So we just hit 17 teams covered. There are only 15 teams left. We're going to have a Michael Thomas article dropping this upcoming Friday that I am writing. I didn't even know what I was writing until I started dogging him on the show tonight, and now I know exactly what my article is going to sound like. It's going to be fantastic. We also have our mock draft show with me every single Monday. Hopefully we get Evan back soon, but when Evan Bushman can't make it, Josh fills in for me. We had Kevin Tompkins on the show from MB Fantasy Life last week. This upcoming week, we're going to have Tyler Hernandez on from Dynasty Nerds. We're going to do another best ball draft to hopefully help you guys prep to become millionaires in those underdog drafts. And then the new episode of Dunking on Joe comes out this Friday, and you're going to be able to find it right here on our YouTube channel. It's basically going to be focusing on Dalvin Cook. Is he a top 10 fantasy running back this season? Someone who thinks he is not.
Simple.
What's that?
It feels like a simple answer.
I was just going to say, because someone who seems to think he's not is coming onto the show to debate Joe. So Joe is taking the simple side. Somebody is going to fight him. I'm very interested to see this myself. Those are some of our favorite things that we put out, because it's literally just two people fighting all the time. And we've seen shows like that, like Pardon the Interruption, get very big. But with Joe, it's all about dunking on him because he's just a little guy and we want to throw basketballs at him. Next week, we're going to have our regular crew back, which means you're not going to have to hear me ramble on and not know what the hell I'm saying and read from a script. Joe Zolo will be back in the house. We are going to be covering Josh's Eagles, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Joe's New England Patriots with a great friend of the show. I think this might be her first time on, no pun intended, all by herself. Normally they come in a tandem, but we are going to have Michelle Majuk from Ball Blast on the show with us. It's going to be a great one. And normally I would sign off now, but Josh, you have something you want to add.
I do, yeah. So for those that follow us on Twitter at Club Fantasy FFL, you probably saw me with a nice big announcement. We're doing a special one-time raffle giveaway. So everybody, well, most people should know that June is Pride Month, celebrating the LGBTQ community. For those that don't know, Club Fantasy, we're very inclusive. I personally don't care what you look like, what your background is, whatever. If you're good people and you love to talk about fantasy football, you more than likely can have a home with us. And we have members from the LGBTQ community, and that's something that I cherish and something that I feel like needs to be celebrated. So as part of this, what I wanted to do is, as we're heading into the last couple days, really, but because my work schedule has been so astronomically busy, getting around to it yesterday. So I'm giving away, well, let me rephrase that. Raffling off a signed J.K. Dobbins Baltimore Ravens jersey. So if you go to our website, it's clubfantasyffl.com, you will see next to the video of this, if you're watching it on there, or just stumbling onto the page, you'll see there's a picture of a J.K. Dobbins jersey. All you have to do is click on it, and it's going to take you over to a website where you can buy raffle tickets. The tickets cost literally $5. That's it. You can buy as many as you'd like. You can buy just one. Really does not matter. What you do need to know is that however many tickets you buy, you're all automatically going to be entered in for the raffle to win said jersey. But 100% of all the ticket sales are going to be donated to the Trevor Project. If you're unfamiliar with the Trevor Project, it's an LGBTQ organization, suicide prevention and crisis intervention hotline, essentially. So, it's something that, again, many people don't know this about me because I don't really talk about it too much because it is very sensitive to me. But my uncle was gay, and unfortunately, he passed away when I was 14. He died of AIDS, and to this day, I still remember that image in my head 3 weeks before he passed away. And it's not something that is great to remember. But what I choose to remember is talking about the New York Yankees with him and talking about baseball and, just him being a really awesome person. And I miss him a lot every day. And he's been gone 20 some odd years now. So, this is just kind of a way for me to say, you know what? Let's pay attention to other good causes. We do a lot for women in fantasy football, but there's a lot of really good that you can do out in the world. And all you have to do is buy a raffle ticket. You get a chance to win something cool out of it. And you're helping a good cause. So
and here
I just head to the website. There you go. So remember, you can go to our Twitter page, Club Fantasy FFL. It's our pinned tweet right now. It will remain that way until the raffle ends next Tuesday on the 5th. And then when Michelle comes on, when we talk the Eagles, Steelers, and Patriots, we'll spin the wheel and give the jersey away. And afterwards, I'll donate a bunch of money because you guys were so awesome and bought a whole bunch of raffle tickets. So
there you go. Well, you heard Josh. Get to the website, click on the J.K. Dobbins jersey. That'll take care of everything else. Guys, it was a wonderful show. Again, Nate, thank you so much. Come back next week. Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Come back next week where we will have Michelle Majuk from Ball Blast and NFL, correct? Research at the NFL.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to be covering the Philadelphia Eagles, Josh's favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Michelle's favorite team, and the New England Patriots, Joe's favorite team. So I don't know why the hell I'm actually going to be on the show next week, but it's
maybe we'll let you host again.
I don't think that's a great idea. This was almost a train wreck now. What's funny is I do so much easier on the DFS shows. But again, thank you for everyone who tuned in. Make sure you go join the raffle. Remember, offense wins fantasy, defense wins championships. I think I was supposed to say that backwards. Everyone have a great night.